Good evening, everybody. I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of the Planning and Zoning Board for May 7th, 2019. Morgan, would you like to start us with a roll call?
Absolutely. Raymond Layton.
Here.
Sonny Aluzo.
Here.
Karen Beatty.
Here.
Don Black.
Here.
Willie Newkirk Sr. Carol Williams. Pat Doherty.
Here.
Jeff Midget. Jerry Walker.
Here.
Marshall Ballard. We just barely have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, our first item is approval of minutes. I didn't see any in our package, so we'll move on past that to our new business. Our first item of new business is consideration of a request from, and I apologize if I get this name incorrect, but Nasr Algaradi to rezone approximately a quarter of an acre parcel from R6S Residential District to C3 Commercial District. This is located at 2409 Oaks Road. The property is further identified as Craven County Parcel ID number 8-019-008, and it is located in Ward 5. Morgan, would you like to give us the staff analysis of this one?
Absolutely. City staff recommends approval of approving the recommendation of this rezoning to the Board of Aldermen. This site has historically been used as a commercial entity for many, many years. It has been a convenience store, other uses. They have recently purchased it. Prior to Hurricane Florence, it was a convenience store. They have since purchased it and would like to reopen it as a commercial establishment. And there are commercial parcels right across the street. If you'd like, I'll pull up a rezoning map for you all that you have in your packet, and the applicant's here if you have any questions for him, okay?
Okay. Thank you, Morgan. Any discussion board for this item before I open it up for public comment?
Is there enough room for parking here? Does anybody know?
Gentlemen, how many
Convenience
parking
store?
spaces are there?
That's some in the front and the back, and there's also a drive-through
Okay, so a total of 6,
here. It's more than six.
more than 6, so they've got plenty. And this is the rezoning map that was sent with your packets. Hope everybody can see that okay.
Okay. Any other discussion? And just to clarify, Morgan, from
Yes.
just so everybody knows, since this is a rezoning, but the property is there, and it's going to be the same use as it was, we're just getting the zoning in line with the use is essentially what is happening. We're not, the parking question, I don't think we're imposing any new parking rules.
Okay.
That is correct. And what the process, just for clarification for everyone who's here, the process will be, if you recommend the rezoning, then it goes to the Board of Aldermen. The Board of Aldermen have the final decision. Then they have to go seek your zoning permit from Brad. And Brad will check all the I's, make sure they've got the right number of parking, landscaping, so on and so forth. And those are those little minute details that will be taken care of on the staff end.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Any other discussion from the board? Okay. At this time, I'll open this item for any public comment. I'd like to ask anyone who'd like to speak in favor of the application first, please step to the podium, clearly state your name and address for the record. Okay, seeing none. At this time, anyone that would like to speak in opposition to the application, please step to the podium, clearly state your name and address for the record.
Really just have some questions. My name's Tim Garrett, live at 3900 Butler Road, which is not in New Bern city limits, but I own the property adjoining and across the street, residential homes, and I'm curious as to what type of establishment they plan to put in the business.
Well, that is not listed in the rezoning application that as it comes before us. See, Morgan, can you help us with that in any way? I mean, convenience store is what I heard, and that's what I presume is the case.
It'll be a commercial convenience of some type. When you're rezoning, you're not committing to a certain project. You are allowing a breadth of uses that
Right.
are in the commercial,
That's right. In the
table
of
of permissible uses.
Yep.
Thank you. So my understanding is a convenience type of establishment, but it's been a commercial establishment for many, many years, 10, 15 years? Longer than that? And he would have to get zoning clearance, as you're aware.
Right.
Okay. I was told it was going to be a tobacco shop, and I understand with the drive-through, I have some concerns with my residential properties of the traffic piling up, and coming through at different hours. I don't know what type of hours they would plan to keep. I certainly expect that it would negatively impact the property values for residential homes in the proximity in which I own them. I'm just not convinced that this is the element that we want in a residential neighborhood.
Okay.
So if we could get some clarification as to what their intent is, perhaps the type of business or the hours. As I said, I've been told it would be a tobacco shop of some sort. I envision something similar to what's at the corner of Highland and Trent Road. And as you know, they've had a number of issues with robberies and other kind of unwanted elements with a tobacco shop of sorts and a quick alcohol stop. A lot of children in the homes that I rent in that area. You're also close to Oaks Road Elementary. In my opinion, it's just not a good fit.
Okay.
Thank you.
That's all I have to say.
All right. Thank you. Sorry, making some notes. Anyone else like to speak in opposition of the application? Okay, seeing none at this time, I will close the public comment and we'll bring it back to the board for any further discussion before I request a motion. Any other discussion?
Well, probably ought to at least discuss a little bit what the permissible uses.
Yep.
What is allowed on that site.
Yep.
We probably need staff to touch on that.
And also, Brad Sevior, he is the zoning administrator. He is here this evening in the audience if you have any specific questions for him relating to zoning. But under the C3 category, these are the uses that are permitted. Of course, you've got residential, and you've also got low-volume traffic generation establishments. You've also got government office buildings, offices of physicians, dentists, banks with drive-throughs. That would be permitted, and so there's a couple of examples. Mechanical, high-tech shops. I mean, the list goes on and on. It's a pretty lengthy list.
So convenience stores are allowed
Brad?
and tobacco shops are allowed, I guess, is to get to Mr. Garrett's question. Really, it's from our point of view, we look at what's allowable since we're not privy to exactly what the use is going to be. And so maybe to answer the question are tobacco shops allowable in this particular zone?
Yes, a tobacco shop would be allowed in this zoning district. I'm just going to read quickly for you the C3 commercial district definition in the zoning ordinance that kind of gives you a sense of the style development allowed in this zone. It says the C3 commercial district is established as a district for offices, personal services, and the retailing of durable and convenience goods. This district will generally be located on the city's major radial roads. Because these districts will be located on high traffic volume arteries and will be subject to view of not only local residents but tourists and other non-local motorists, ample off-street parking, controlled traffic movement, and an appropriate appearance, including suitable planting, shall be provided. And we provide for most of these things with our development standards that you find in other parts of the ordinance.
Board, I'd like to make a comment. As they were speaking earlier, Morgan stated, it's been commercial activity in that little box right there for many, many years. As she was stating, it was a convenience store which sold tobacco products and other, even alcohol products at one time. So because we don't know what it is, but we do know that area is not strange to that being a convenience market area.
Yeah, I'd just like to say that the necessity for this is driven by the hurricane and the damage that was sustained to the building at the time. The zoning just isn't congruous with the historical use of the property, and so that's why staff is in favor and supportive of this particular zoning change, just to make sure that the storm doesn't, cause undue harm to local business owners and residents.
Okay.
So just so that it's on the record, if we make a recommendation to change this zoning, certainly that doesn't stop any other issues that may stop it in its future path, such as parking or anything else. That's for others to decide after this.
The site as it exists currently has enough parking for the size of the building with the way that our design standards work. So it's already conforming to most of the requirements that would be imposed upon the site as it stands. And that follows from its historical use in this manner.
And just to be clear, there are also requirements within development standards for drive-throughs, correct?
That's correct, loading and stacking requirements. This particular site, because it would be a continuation of the previous use, wouldn't be subject to the site plan review if they were to continue the use that existed previously on the site.
Okay.
Explain to me how before now that it's still zoned residential, how did the commercial business exist?
Sure. Prior to the adoption of the zoning ordinance, this whole area had a lot of commercial properties, and you can kind of see the commercial designated across the street. Most of the Oaks Road area, we just designated specifically what was the existing use at the time. I am not entirely sure with this project. The R6S zoning district that it is currently came about much later, and the main intent of that was to retain the standards of the R6 residential zoning district, but disallowed the presence of mobile homes. So I suspect when they went back through and rezoned this entire area to R6S, this particular property just kind of got caught with that sweeping broad brush. And notable is that the C3 zoning district does not allow mobile homes either, and so that previous zoning change for the area, the intent of it would not be lost by this particular change.
Okay. Thank you, Brad. Any other questions for Brad while we've got him up here? Okay, so any other discussion from the board before I entertain a motion? Okay, hearing none at this time, I'll entertain a motion, and I will remind you that your motion should be phrased as a recommendation to the Board of Aldermen, as we are not the final say for this. This will go before the Board of Aldermen. Regardless of our recommendation, it will go before them for the final decision.
At this point, I would like to make a motion to approve for the Alderman, a positive recommendation for the Alderman to approve the rezoning from R6S to C3 for this plot located at 2409 Oaks Road, further identified as parcel 8-019-008 in Ward 5.
Okay, so we have a motion. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Morgan, why don't we do a roll call on this one, so the Board of Aldermen will know how we all voted?
Absolutely. I'll do a roll call, starting with Mr. Doherty,
Yes.
Mr. Walker,
Yes.
Mr. Luzo,
No.
Mr. Layden,
Yes.
Mr. Beatty,
Yes.
and Mr. Black.
Yes.
5-1, the motion passes to recommend approval to the Board of Aldermen.
Okay, thank you. All right, moving on to our
Big one.
Next item, it is of new business, that is consideration of a major subdivision general plan submitted by McKim Creed and Weyerhaeuser NR Company. This is a proposed 499.3 acre, 3-lot major subdivision located to the southeast of NC 43 Highway Connector and to the north of US Highway 70. The property is further identified as Craven County Parcel ID numbers 8-209-17000, 8-209-17001, 8-809-17002, 8-209-17003, and 8-209-17004, and it is located in Ward 4. Morgan, would you like to give us the staff analysis of this item?
Yes, so on February 15th of 2019, the city's Departmental Subdivision Review Committee reviewed the proposed general plan for West New Bern Phase 1 and determined that the plan substantially meets the requirements for approval. You have a copy of those comments and how they were addressed that I passed out to you all. The staff recommends approval as presented, and they are here if you have any particular questions.
Okay. Any staff discussion?
We recommend approval. They have gone through the development agreement process that we have outstanding with them. This is just a big piece of the puzzle.
Okay, perfect. Any board discussion before we open for public comment?
Mr. Chairman, we just got this package Thursday evening, and Morgan was kind enough to send me some supplemental information. We are in the process of approving a small part of it as well as a major part of it at the same time. I don't think I had enough time to review everything, and I'm glad that we have representatives from the developers here because I have some questions. I am pleased by some of the artwork I've gotten that my interpretation of the artwork is there are going to be some recreational facilities. I saw at least 2 swimming pools. There are large ponds that presumably are going to be used for recreational purposes as well. I don't know that. I am not too happy with what's presumably a nature trail because my idea of a nature trail or natural walk is something that's non-linear. It's something that has turns and whatnot. Because there's a right-of-way from some utility companies, the major portion of this nature trail is as straight as a landing strip on an airport, which I'm uncomfortable with. If you look at some of these maps, what's shown in green on one of these maps is largely a water resource, whereupon there's some very large ponds, like they probably be used for drainage. This property, I believe, was recently part of Craven County, but because of the developments and whatnot, there is no way that can be built without sewer, so it was very recently annexed to the city.
Correct. It was rezoned some time ago.
The development has to be in a sewer district because of the capacity. I don't even know what the total size of the thing is, but some of the maps I saw, this is more representative of something I'm familiar in New York City called Whitestone, where the parcels are extremely small. And I haven't had enough time to digest it. That kind of development is the best for New Bern. I have reached out to one of our commissioners, and he is concerned that we do need housing, especially after the hurricane. But the impact of something such a size and whatnot, I would be more comfortable if I had more time to reflect upon it, because it is such a large development. We just approved the rezoning of a 1/4 acre, and I thought everybody did their due diligence with the questions. I had a question that somebody else asked, so I was going to ask again. But something of this size, of this impact, I don't have enough information on, especially where the traffic is going to be going and whatnot.
Okay, thank you, Don. I guess maybe this would be a good time for staff to give us a refresher on what happens before these applications come before us. That may be something Brad can help us with. There's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes with staff confirming that the request or the applications are, that they meet all of the requirements. So why don't you?
Yeah, so essentially before a project gets to you, we take it through our departmental review process. And at that point, all the various city departments, from public works to fire to development services and inspections, all of them, they get to take a look at the project and make sure that it conforms to all of our minimum requirements and standards. And so the issues that you raise have been looked at and addressed by staff in the meeting prior to this, and I believe you have a copy of the comments from that process where anything that wasn't up to our minimum standards for the city, or they didn't show it to the correct degree, we had them address that. And so while I understand that it is a very large development and there is a lot to look at and to think about, the applicants have been through a process already. It's not an immediate thing. We've been meeting with them as staff for a very long time, making sure that all of the details and all of the particulars are correct. So this isn't a rushed or hasty action, and our recommendation is not rushed or hasty either. The time that you had to review it is what has been specified in the land use ordinance as an acceptable period of time for the Planning and Zoning Board to review documents of this nature, and essentially make sure that, check back that we have actually made them fulfill the requirements. And personally, I headed up the site plan review process for these projects, and I feel, and the rest of staff who have also looked at this, feel that it meets all of our requirements and that this is a very good project that will be very helpful for the city and for the residents, especially in light of the housing crunch that we're experiencing right now.
So Brad, are we still trying to stay away from doing a sprawl development?
Sorry, are you asking if this will be a sprawl type development?
Yeah, I'm asking, are we still staying away from that?
Yeah, and as, you know, the density is the zoning districts that you find in this development currently is R6 and C3, and those are more intense and more dense zoning districts. And so this will be a very big positive for in terms of like infrastructure maintenance and making sure that everything is concentrated in specific areas. We already have development that is that far west in town, and it's kind of at the edge of our service areas, and having this development there will allow us to expand, for instance, our fire service capacity out in that area so that we can better serve not just this area but existing areas in the city.
Brad, I respect what you're telling me, but is that a yes or a no?
Yes, we're still staying away from sprawl, absolutely.
Okay, and again, what is before us in this particular application tonight is a 3-lot major subdivision. Now, obviously, we all know from looking at our agenda that directly correlates to our third item of new business on the agenda. But again, this particular application is for the subdivision.
Brad, I can tell you, I had 41 pages, I had pre-planned business for Sunday. Whereas you said that you've been working on this for some months beforehand, it would have been very nice to give members of this board time with some of the information you had for us to review it. I don't feel comfortable voting on this right now, as I did not have the time to review it. It was dropped on us Thursday or Friday, 2 of the days are weekends, and on something of this size, a heads up, an earlier heads up would have been very, very helpful.
I appreciate that. Is there a particular duration of time that you would like in future for projects of this nature?
Well, Sundays I try to take off. It's the one day, and I usually work summer Sundays.
Sure.
But to consider, I understand that the Board of Commissioners work the same way, but on important budget items, they give them more time. I think when you're talking about something in the hundreds and hundreds of units, I think common sense dictates that we do deserve some earlier heads up on it. We can decide, we can review smaller plats very easily, very quickly. On this plat here, I'm trying to determine how much green space there is. Apparently, the developer considers water space green space, and that technically might be correct. The portions of the nature trails, you have a report from the different safety officers, the fire, from Public Works for the sewer and whatnot. And it just takes time for me to go through that. I mean, I didn't have the time to do that.
Sure. I guess I'm a little confused because the Planning and Zoning Board recommended the specific duration that we give you to review documents. So I guess the question is, would you like us to amend the section of the land use ordinance that dictates how long you have to review?
It might be appropriate, and I think when we go to the community impact statements, that would be very helpful, that we wouldn't, we have the community impact statement, we have a more full packet.
Sure. I guess I'm not entirely sure what'll.
You were with this since February, apparently. We received this, just not even a week ago.
Sure.
So perhaps to bring us back to center for tonight, we're obviously not going to amend the
No, I
land use
understand
ordinance
that.
tonight. So, our options,
We can table it as one option.
well, and so I was going to go through our options, and we've still got to have our public comment, but our options are to table it and discuss it, review it between now and our next meeting, and then act on it at our next meeting. Again, as a reminder, being a major subdivision, the final approval or disapproval rests with this board. This does not go to the Board of Aldermen. So we can table it, review it, deal with it, act on it at our next meeting, or we can act on it tonight, obviously. But we have to act on it within 60 days. Is that correct, Morgan?
That's correct.
That's correct.
Yeah, or it is deemed approved. So we can table it and deal with it at our next meeting, but that would be obviously the deadline for us to have any discussion and to act on it. Or the 60 days would elapse and it would be deemed approved by the ordinance. So, having said that, is there any other discussion before I open this up for public comment? Okay, hearing none. At this time, I'd like to open this item up for public comment. I'd ask anyone who'd like to speak in favor of the application, please step to the podium and clearly state your name and address for the record.
Good evening. I'm Tara Murphy. I'm a project manager with McKim Creed, and I'm here representing the project. Mr. Tim Jackson with Weyerhaeuser and Mr. Todd Powell are also here this evening, as is Richard Collier, civil engineer with McKim Creed. I appreciate having a chance to speak tonight. This is a bigger property. What we're doing tonight is one piece of the whole. So if I could just kind of step back a little bit, I think that Brad and Morgan gave a very thorough overview. We have been working with staff for a number of years on this development, and we're very pleased to be here this evening. The plan that you see on the screen before you is kind of the general overview of the vision for the property. The specific area you see in green is what is envisioned as the open space component, Mr. Black. This plan is a very streamlined, simplified version that appears in the development agreement. This was a result of the master planning effort. Weyerhaeuser took the initiative when they were looking at this property and how to move forward to engage land design, McKim Creed, as well as a number of different professionals, technical professionals, to determine the best way, the best use of this land. So several design iterations were done, very collaborative effort. We engaged the city, technical staff, as well as other members. And the overall master plan was envisioned, and then it was taken and streamlined to the plan that you see attached, which, like I said, is part of the development agreement. And that is kind of the map, the vision for how this project will proceed. What we're doing tonight is kind of setting the stage, the first pieces. So whereas the overall property is 500 plus acres, what we're here tonight to talk about is developing the first 3 neighborhood sections. So what the agenda item that we're discussing right now does is it sets the stage and provides the overall pieces by which Weyerhaeuser is contracting with, in this particular case, a housing firm to come in and then further develop those neighborhoods. So currently, the next agenda item after this is kind of piggybacking on what we're doing here tonight, and they will kind of further show those parcels. So this is kind of scaled, grayed back is the overall vision that I had talked about earlier, and that's a master plan. It's an illustrative that has the ability to breathe and kind of grow based on market conditions, but the overall vision is as you see it. These pieces that are rendered are what are part of the Phase 1A improvements. You can see that the existing Craven 30 Parkway that's rendered in green, that exists, and there's going to be some changes to that road to put some on-street parking. There's a trail. We're making another roadway connection, but the actual lotting that you see in that illustrative is what Brian O'Kane with our consulting engineers will be talking to you in the next agenda item. I appreciate your comments about open space and the trail, and there are some areas where the trail is very linear in this particular portion. I do think it's important to remember that this is the first piece of the bigger picture. So ultimately, you know, the big ponds will be done, additional curvilinear paths for the trail will connect around the larger ponds. And certainly, I'm sure, you know, benches and some seating is envisioned. And then, of course, landscaping. So I think all those things go to that open space component, and certainly as an overall total, there's considerably more open space than I believe is required by the strict letter of the ordinance. So I hope that kind of overview helps a little bit. We're here to answer any questions. We're certainly excited to see this project progress, and would appreciate your support this evening.
Thank you, Tara. Any questions for Ms. Murphy before she steps
Yes.
away from the podium?
The open space is both water and green space. Why is so much of the open space in the large area? Why are the ponds so large? Is that necessary for drainage?
The ponds will be not only aesthetic and used for open space, but they are also serving the stormwater purpose, yes.
So if the ponds were made smaller, perhaps deeper, could you afford more green space in the ways of open fields or whatnot, or that's not permitted?
I think that there could be a trade-off, but we have you know, very strict, you know, guidelines that we need to meet with regards to the stormwater component. Certainly, these ponds are envisioned as to be aesthetic. I mean, they're going to be gently side sloped. They're going to be planted. So they're very much a portion of the bigger vision and the picture for how this development is going to look.
My vision of the water on the plots and whatnot it was something like 80% of that central green space, if not more, was actually water, and there was very little surrounding green around the water, especially a very large pond. If you take a look at that green section, the horizontal part, about 80% of that's water.
A good portion of that is part of the water for the stormwater ponds and the linear ponds. Certainly the piece that's down towards the southwest, farthest away from 43, is more wooded. It is envisioned overall that there will be neighborhood amenities in various pockets. So there's an outline in the development agreement as to how the project is going to be built. There's a vision. There's been lots of documents that have been created, and I think that it's not a leap of faith. I mean, there's clear direction here, and it's documented as to how this is going to proceed. But what you're seeing is the initial aspects of it. So other elements of open space, and active and passive, will occur as the development progresses.
That large diagonal line traversing the water and heading around 11 o'clock or so, that's a large part of your nature trail, that straight line. And I think it follows very close to the right-of-way of US 70 until it approaches the more irregular shaped area furthest east, where you have the nature trail. Is that correct? The walking trail is in those areas?
The walking trail, it's kind of throughout the site, and it's going to consist of sidewalks. It's going to consist of multi-use paths. The green that you see is just the overall area in which, generally speaking, open space will occur. That is not to say that other open space or amenity items can't be introduced in, say, the red area or the yellow area. That is simply the area that we have illustrated. The linear one that runs up towards 11 o'clock, that's part of the easement, as is the one that runs along 70. So I think that to take it and just say that those green areas are the only open space or only amenities that are going to happen in this development as it progresses is not accurate.
I think maybe, Don, one thing that will help looking at the scale here is this appears to be, although printed, this is not printed to scale, but if you look at the graphic scale, you can see that longest bar is 300 feet. And so I think maybe, at least my point of view when I looked at it initially, is I think there's probably more green space here than it looks like looking at an 8.5 by 11 because of the scale. And if we look at the graphic scale, that being 300 feet, that longest bar, I don't know if we can we put this one up? That might be helpful. FC Morgan, do you have this one?
We do. Our open space that we're showing on that graphic is about 104 acres. So it's considerably larger than is required. Let me see if I can get that.
How much of that is water?
Maybe 60% or so.
Brad, I'm not aware of a requirement of any sort of ratio for the green space. If we can, it is typical, or it is not uncommon for stormwater features or BMPs, usually not nearly as irregular or what I might call aesthetically pleasing as what we see here, to be included in green space. Or in open space? Is that correct?
They can be, as long as they're designed in such a way that makes that conducive, and the designs presented are like that. Our open space requirement is 5%, and this vastly exceeds what the actual minimum requirements of the land use ordinance are.
Right. Again, and my question, Don, was just trying to bring us back to the center of what the requirements are. And To my knowledge, and Brad's confirmed that, what is presented is within the requirements as deemed by staff in reviewing the ordinance.
I asked Morgan, and maybe you can help me, how many individual plots are shown there in that diagram there? There's quite a few.
In this one here, the master plan has approximately just less than 1,000 single-family homes. And I think that it's important to note that this is the overall vision. This is an illustrative of what could happen under our current zoning conditions. So what we're here for this evening is to set us up to do these first 3 neighborhoods. So whereas this is kind of the vision for the overall build-out, tonight's focus is specific to us carving out 3 tracts of land by which the applicant who's coming in next on your agenda can go ahead and further lot those out for single-family homes.
Well, I see a perfect bit of seed going over this now. On those diagrams, I saw perhaps 2 public swimming pools for the community. Did I interpret that correctly?
During the process, there were 2 neighborhood pools to serve the New Bern, the West New Bern development.
And there was like a central, what I would refer to something as a clubhouse, a community center. Was that parking that I saw by at that community center?
There was a community kind of facility for the residents of the West New Bern development. But again, those are all components that will be done in future phases.
Right. Again,
this specific phase is for the 3 tracts of land that we need to carve off of this piece in order to progress this development to the next level, so that some homes can get out there, we can get some traction on it, build up additional interest, and then start to develop the other pieces out as well.
again, nothing wrong with the questions, Don, but the application before us tonight is this major subdivision. So, yeah, what we're looking at, or what we had up on the screen, is the overall master plan, but that's technically not part of our application tonight.
Yeah, but if we take it such piecemeal as the way we're going all the time, though, we can be hoodwinked and we can have something in terms of mass. Well, I don't think it'd be a good idea for Weyerhaeuser to put no recreation in that. But I'm not comfortable with some of the developments that have been approved in the past that have a lack of recreation. This property here, even though it's in the city of New Bern, is so far from the recreational facilities of New Bern, has not walking distance of children and whatnot to get from West Craven to the current facilities in the middle part of the city.
Understand. And so what I would ask you then is,
And this is
how would we
also-
deal with that as a part of this subdivision request that's before us? I think some of these questions are better asked as a part of the individual plan unit developments that come before us, not unlike what's going to come in our next item that go, again, through the subdivision plan approval or the departmental site plan review approval process. And so a lot of those boxes are checked as a part of that review process.
But it's my understanding that there is no requirement as to putting certain kinds of recreational facilities in by that process.
Correct. I think anything that you see here is a part of the development agreement that
Are you
the
telling me that
overall
part
owner.
of the development agreement then is going to be largely based on the representation that we saw the swimming pools and whatnot in the plan, and so acting in good faith to go forward with this,
Well,
they would have to do that? I don't
so
think it's saying
it's
that.
not good faith necessarily. It's agreement between the city and the developer. And so, we have to rely on staff as residents of the city to make sure that those agreements are enforced. And then make sure that once those agreements have been reviewed, those applications that come before us, that those stipulations have been applied to those applications. And that's what comes before us to review. And that's when those questions are appropriate, in my opinion.
Okay, I have a question.
Yep.
I see that there's going to be a school and a firehouse. I guess it's a multifaceted question. Who's gonna build these? Is the city gonna build them, or is the developer going to build them?
The land is provided.
Right, they're donating the land to the city.
Okay, so do we know when those are gonna kick in? How many homes?
No.
And the reason I'm asking is because one of the things that we've discussed several times in this board is whether or not fire safety is amenable. And what I see here is that we're being asked to approve a portion of this development. How does the fire and rescue get there?
The fire department and
This
police.
is not across the street from,
The fire department reviewed this during department review, and you'll see their comments in there. Fire, schools, police all saw this at department review.
Okay,
So that's been addressed, and the land, you said, was going to be eventually donated to the city.
Yeah, the proposed project is serviceable by all city services, including fire, and when there needs to be an increase in capacity, they will build an additional fire station, and that's something that they already had planned to do, and this presents a good opportunity to do so.
Brad, that's my question, because in a year from now or 6 months from now, we're gonna be sitting here being asked to approve another portion of this. And I'd like to know, at what point does the fire station be built and manned? That's all I'm asking.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, I don't have the answer to that right now, but the fire department knows when that needs to happen, and they have very specific fire protection guidelines, and we're actually one of the more higher rated fire service districts in the state.
I have
I have complete confidence in the fire chief.
confidence in the fire chief. I have no problem with that. I just like to know for myself, when it comes time to vote again in the future.
Absolutely, yes.
What,
You will have that information the next time that
Okay.
a project
That's
of this
all I'm
nature
asking.
comes forward.
I
Yeah,
understand that they
absolutely.
looked at it, but I just like to know for my own personal edification, when does that kick in?
Okay, yeah, absolutely.
So fire stations and schools. So I guess that begs the question perhaps, is there a threshold for this development number of units before a school is required?
That's up to Craven County.
Understood, and that, again, just a question, so, okay. All right. Any other questions? Okay. Would anyone else like to come before and speak on behalf or in favor of the application? Please step to the podium and clearly state your name and address for the record. Okay, I see everybody's gun shy now. Would anyone like to step to this podium and speak in opposition of the application? Please do so and clearly state your name and address for the record. Okay, seeing none. Before I close public comment, do we have any more questions for the applicant? So that if we need to have them come forward, we can do that now before I close the public comment and bring it back to the board for discussion. Okay, hearing none, I will close the public comment and bring it back to the board for further discussion before I entertain a motion. Okay, what do we have, folks?
I'm sort of leaning towards Don's idea about staying this and putting it off for a month. And I hate saying that, because I can't stand things being put off. I like decisions being made. I like to have a little more information about this. I must have misunderstood this project when I read it, before I read it, because I hear so many rumors in the real estate business what's going to happen, and most rumors are incorrect. I was hoping to see more retail and other things, and it's not just a big, large development myself. Looks like most of these homes being built at the size that was built over in Greenbrier in the Fairway section with 0.1 acres, 0.11 acres, little tiny parcels. Is that, I should have said this before while we had the applicant up here. I'd like to know, is any bigger parcels? They look like they're all that size, except for a few on corners, which are 0.2, something like that. Most of these going to be like very small.
What's the current zoning of the residential sections? Is it
It's R6.
R6?
R6? Okay.
That's why I was asking that earlier about sprawl development, because I was looking very, very tight with tiny lots with all that traffic volume piling on top of each other. That's why I asked that question, because it's looking like you're moving back
Well,
into
that-
the tight development.
Well, that's density, which is different from sprawl.
Yeah, so with sprawl, you run into issues with like infrastructure and service capacity and things of that nature. But with the
So it's spread it out.
particular upgrades that be necessitated by this project, including that fire service increase, you're actually going to see expanded capacity not just for here, but for other portions of the city that are currently on the limit of our fire protection radius. So you have the opposite problem. Like instead of having the negative effects of sprawl, you have the positive effects of concentration in this instance. So I wouldn't characterize this as a sprawl development by any means.
You know, as we sit here, it occurs to me that those that are for, those that are against, if you're against, what the flavor is that we're trying to change the zoning or the density. And I don't think that's what our position is.
Mm-mm.
I think, as I heard my colleague say, he has a lot of confidence in the fire chief, will have a lot of confidence in the city. I know what kind of work goes into these things. There's an awful lot of work from the developer, from that end, as well as the city. And a lot of people put a lot of time and effort into this, and I can appreciate their time. And I know their professionalism on this is probably top grade there. So I take this and look at it myself as, does this fall within permissible? And as we've gone through all of this, I believe it does. I don't have a question. I may have, turned that track out a little bit differently, maybe not made it so straight, but hey, that's kind of a personal aesthetic. As I look at this, I see a lot of green space. I see there is a fair amount of water. It's storm water, it doesn't matter. I've seen the water over by the hotels over there. My gosh, these ponds look like golf course ponds. They're wonderful. They look great. And from what I'm hearing, there's going to be some proper planting and the slopes along the banks. I think this could be real attractive. So I'll bring us back to that once again. Are we voting for our favorite color out here? Or are we voting for, or recommending, I should say, what falls within permissible and whether or not we make that choice?
I'm in agreement with that completely. I'm just saying, what I'm agreeing, especially what I'm agreeing with Don is, I like to have more time on something this large in the future. Maybe we should go back to the drawing board or something on a process that's this big to maybe have a little more time. And I was trying to read all this in the last few days, and it was a little bit astounding. But I'm all in favor of building these developments. We need the space. We need the houses. I hope that when the rest of the land around it is developed, and I think it will be in the future, I hope there's some other things that are considered about rather than just PUDs, or maybe rather than just housing. Maybe we should also look at some retail, which would bring some revenue to the city. So, but I'm in favor of the project completely. And I agree with you say, I sound like the Greek chorus now. I agree with both gentlemen.
Sounds like a couple of my fellow board members are leaning towards the tabling option, and so what is important if we, Morgan, you raising your hand?
Oh, after you. After
And so what I think is important is, I think it's not productive to simply table and then come back and talk about it again next month. I think we need to have some specific questions that we would want answered before we do that. Otherwise, I fear, knowing how boards are, we'd all come back together next month and we'd have these same sort of questions. And so I think, if that is the direction that we as a board decide to go, it's going to be important for us to have some questions that we would like answers to for this particular application, so that we can say, okay, we've checked that box, we're satisfied, or no, we're still not happy about that one. We need to have some very specific questions that we want answered. Okay.
Are we to answer those, are we to come up with those specific questions at this meeting?
See, that's the question, isn't it?
Well, we can do that in a round table discussion. I'm not sure that's terribly helpful. I think if we table it and we are going to take the time to review this again, I think what needs to happen is each of us needs to convey any questions we have to staff so that we can get those answers prior to, in advance to our next meeting, and be satisfied. Doesn't mean you have to be in favor of or in opposition of. Just be satisfied that you've had time to review it and you know your position when we come back in here for our next meeting and we can act on this. I mean, that's our obligation as planning and zoning board to act on these
And
that
adding
come
to
before
your
us.
thought, any questions we should give them enough time, the staff.
Absolutely.
To get back and forth. So I think we should do at least 2 weeks before the next meeting so they can have the answers for us.
Seems reasonable.
Frankly, my question, the only question I had was about the, when the fire is gonna kick in, and Brad said he's gonna come up with, he's gonna give me that information next meeting. I'm fine with that. And also, I think that, I'm not sure whether or not we should throw in our views as to what a development should look like. I think that's not really.
Well, it's okay to have an opinion. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is that the application that is before us is the subdivision. And so, once it's subdivided, then the use for that parcel that's been subdivided comes back before us again, particularly if it's planned unit development, or if it gets subdivided again. All of those things come back before us. So, it's not that we subdivide and then we never see it again. These things continually come back before us on these large developments like this, and they also continually go before staff before they come to us. So I'm not in favor of tabling it, but again, I'm merely one member of this board, and so once we finish our discussion, I'll entertain a motion and we'll see where we fall.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I wasn't necessarily saying I wanted to table it.
Okay.
I was saying maybe in the future, a project of this magnitude, this size, 500 acres, we don't really know what's gonna happen to the rest of it. Unless it's gonna be a continuation of this first 71 units, then I know what it's gonna be. I know exactly what it's gonna be.
Fair enough. I apologize.
That's all I'm saying.
Okay.
Because I hate tabling things because it gets frustrating to come, and especially if you develop this, with risking money and their time and the city staff. I don't want to jump at things hastily, but I hate pushing things off. And
So
I
then
know
what
we're
I
only voting today on what was presented to us.
What I'd suggest is, once we deal with this, our agenda items tonight, is we reopen that discussion about how long we think we need. And there may be a scale associated with that.
That's reasonable.
Application that involves X number of units or X number of acres or more than 2 parcels, subdivisions. We can set what those are, that there's an additional length of time
Sure.
that we'd like for review of that. And so I think we can reopen that discussion once we deal with our agenda items tonight. So, if I may, bring us back to our item that is the application that is before us. Sounds like we may have talked it to a logical conclusion of our discussions. Is that the consensus I'm hearing? And so, if that is in fact the case, at this time I will entertain a motion for this particular application. And just to remind everybody, the application that we're dealing with is item B on our agenda, and that is the major subdivision, 3 lots, at West New Bern, approximately 499 acres.
At this point, I'd like to introduce a motion to table this motion, so at least that this member has more time to review it and become comfortable with it.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second it, let's see what everybody votes.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Morgan, would you like to have a roll call vote for this one?
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Doherty?
No.
Mr. Walker?
No.
Mr. Aluzo?
Yes.
Mr. Layton?
No.
Mr. Beatty?
No.
Mr. Black?
Yes.
The motion is 2-4, so the motion does not pass.
Motion fails.
Yes, that's correct. Mr. Chairman, if you wouldn't mind, just staff would like to make a final comment or two on this.
Sure. Please.
While there's a lot of ideas and opinions of what you would like a neighborhood to look like, I have my own. You have your own. Some people want to have sprawling 5 acres and nobody near them. Other people like to have tight communal living. It is up to the person as what they decide, as it's the same for the developer as what they decide to offer. And the only things that we can dictate to them are what is at section 15-79 in the land use ordinance. We don't have the power to control some of these things that we're discussing. And as far as recreation goes, they could do a butterfly meadow if they so chose, or they could do a bowling alley. We can't dictate what recreation they offer, just open space.
Right.
So just a couple things to think about. And I'd also like to note in section 1579 sub 5 that you have the option to approve conditionally, or disapprove. So just a couple things for you to think about before you make a decision. Thank you.
Okay. So we had a failed motion. Do I hear another motion? Again, Morgan's just given us our options. We voted not to table it, so now the onus is on us to act on this tonight.
Well, Mr. Chair, I would make a motion to recommend approval.
Well, and we are the final approval on this one. Yeah, sorry, Jerry.
I would make a motion that we would approve the
Okay.
Major Subdivision General Plan as described in Part B of the agenda.
Okay, we have a motion. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a second. Let's have a roll call on this one as well. Morgan?
Yes, sir. Just 1 second, please. All right. Mr. Doherty?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Mr. Luzat?
Yes.
Mr. Layton?
Yes.
Mr. Beatty?
Yes.
And Mr. Black?
Abstain.
Yes, sir. Okay, the motion passes unanimously since abstaining goes with the majority vote.
Okay. All right. Thank you, everybody. So that's going to bring us to our third item of new business. You'll give me a moment to get my papers organized here now. Okay, third item of new business is consideration of a planned unit development general plan submitted by DR Horton and Weyerhaeuser Real Estate Development Company. It is a proposed 13.06 acre, 71 lot planned unit development located to the southeast of Clock Road and to the north of West Elizabeth Avenue. The property is further identified as a portion of Craven County Parcel ID ID numbers 8-209-17003 and 8-2209-13001, and it is in Ward 4. Okay, Morgan, would you like to give us staff analysis on this?
Yes, Chairman. On the February 15, 2019, again, Development Services reviewed the proposed general plan for the planned unit development. City staff recommends approval of the general plan for DR Horton Phase 1 Express Development West New Bern as presented. Again, you have the comments from the DRC meeting that Brad chaired that morning, excuse me. You have comments there. They have met all of the conditions, and we are here if you have any questions.
Okay. All right, board discussion. Thank you, Morgan. So if I saw correctly on the plans, everything, all streets are curb and gutter, which is a good thing. That's the direction we wanted to head. So, and the fire department was pleased with the road widths, and so I think that has been some of our major concerns with planned unit developments in the past. So it looks like we're headed in the right direction in that regard. Those were my initial comments in looking through the application. Any others before I open this for public comment?
One of the questions that I had, I'm kind of curious, do you know what the approximate price, is this considered middle income housing?
Well, I don't think we're required to be told that for a planned unit development. I think that usually only comes into play, and maybe not even for us, but that usually only comes into play if it's tax credit housing or there's some sort of federal subsidy involved. So in this particular case, you know, it's if the development is not geared in that regard, so whoever they can sell a parcel to. Any other discussion before I open for public comment? Okay, so hearing none, this time I will open the floor to public comment. Again, I'd ask anyone who'd like to speak in favor of the application, please step forward and clearly state your name and address for the record.
Good evening, my name is Brian O'Kane. I work at 2755 Charles Boulevard in Greenville. I'm the civil engineer at record for the proposal that's in front of you. I appreciate your time tonight. The proposal is for 71 lots on 13 acres. Certainly can vouch for the amount of time and effort that's been put into this from Weyerhaeuser and from my client, D.R. Horton, as the developer of this particular phase of the project. I'm here to answer any questions. You know, I've been working with staff for several months on this and have designed it in accordance with the zoning ordinance and the development agreement that's in place with Weyerhaeuser, but here to answer any questions.
Okay. What is the average lot area? Do you?
The average lot size is just over 6,000 square feet.
Okay.
And we have some lots just from geometry that are well significantly over that, but
sure.
The average is, I think, it's on the next page, but just over 6,000.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. O'Kane? Mr. O'Kane? Okay, thank you, sir. Anyone else like to speak in favor of the application?
Hi, Mr. Chairman, my name is Tim Jackson. I'm Project Manager and Director of Development for Weyerhaeuser NR Company. I want to thank you all very much for considering these applications. We're real happy to come before you with the first single-family subdivision that's part of this West New Bern proposed development. You recall the zoning and the master development plan were approved by the Board of Aldermen several months ago, and that development agreement outlines a process through which development would come forward. It outlines all the rules under which that development needs to come forward in sections and in pieces, and this is the first piece of that is single family. You may recall that several months ago you approved a parcel across 43, which is the future home of the Department of Motor Vehicles, which is moving forward. So that piece is well on its way. This is now the first single-family subdivision. The remainder of this parcel is a mixed-use development that has significant retail and office and apartments and a mix of housing from small lot to large lot. That's what's planned here. That's what's part of the development agreement. And we're just now in the process of taking the first steps to implement the very first subdivision. So thank you very much for your consideration. Be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson. Anybody have any questions for Mr. Jackson? Thank you again. Okay, anyone else like to speak in favor of the application?
Good evening, members of the board. Zach Anderson from D.R. Horton, 2000 Ariel Center Parkway in Morrisville. I am the applicant for this particular pod of the PUD that is West New Bern. That was previously approved for the zoning. It's a large mixed-use community, which it has been very difficult for me as just a developer, as well as Weyerhaeuser and our consultants and our contractors and folks we're bidding it out to separate the individual pieces from the whole. So I totally understand the mixing of thoughts and opinions as we go through the different pieces of this puzzle. But what we're looking to do at this point is provide or seek an approval to an application to construct 71 single-family houses to start in our first pod here in West New Bern. 25 of these will be rear-loaded houses that the garages are in the back. The fronts face the street, so there will be a beautiful streetscape that fronts both the neighborhood and the natural area between us and Clock Road there. So that's not in the open space plan, but it will be a green area that the houses front into. And all these different items have been passed and approved through staff. So the fire department, obviously, and zoning. We meet all the zoning requirements per the PUD. So we're looking to be great partners, continued partners as we grow out of Lake Tyler, but provide a similar sense of feel and revitalization in a new neighborhood. So we look forward to moving forward on this project, and if you have any questions, please ask.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Anderson. Any questions for Mr. Anderson? Okay, thank you.
When do you,
Oh,
excuse
sorry.
me, when do you plan to have, to break ground if we approve and going forward? How long do you think the construction will take?
The contract between us and Weyerhaeuser could be worked out at any moment. So contingent upon approval of these plans, we could get started next month, realistically. We've had these projects out to bid for about 2 months now, so we're very close. We'd love to get started as soon as possible and really fast track some of the development so that we can get lots on the ground in 2019. So.
I had a discussion earlier today with the Board of Commissioners. He's very concerned about getting new houses built and whatnot. So you think it's realistic that's 2010, 2011, some of those homes be ready for occupancy?
Yeah, I think we could have homes built, sold, and lived in this calendar year.
In this calendar year?
Correct.
A lot of these homes, I imagine, would be some sort of prefabricated is what you're planning.
These will all be stick-built on-site.
That's impressive.
So no modular. So none of them will be modular.
No modular, no mobile. These are all stick-built.
Okay, any other questions for Mr. Anderson? Thank you, sir. Okay, anyone else like to speak in favor of the application? Okay, seeing none, anyone like to speak in opposition of the application? Likewise, please step forward and clearly state your name and address for the record. Okay, seeing none, at this time I will close public comment, bring it back to the board for any further discussion before I entertain a motion. Okay, colleagues, what would we like to discuss?
I have no opposition on myself.
Okay.
I said I have no oppositions to it.
Okay, well, hearing no further discussion, at this time I will entertain a motion.
At this point, I'd like to introduce a motion to approve the plan for the Plan Unit Development General Plan submitted by D.R. Horton Weyerhaeuser Real Estate Development Company, identified as the property Craven County Parcel ID 8-201-1703 and 8-2209-1 13001.
Okay, thank you, Don.
I'll
Do
second
we hear a
that.
second? Okay. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Thanks, everybody. Let's see. Gets us to our final item of new business, and that is our community impact statements. And I think, Don, you've got some discussion from the board?
Yeah, Jeff Area and I, we discussed this, and we both believe it would be helpful both to the Board of Aldermen and for the Planning Department on large studies as this here that we had. Sonny brought up a great question, at what point do we need new fire departments, new schools, or other special services? So that if the use ordinance, the land use ordinance that would set certain levels, that if a rezoning would have something of impact of 500 new housing units or over 500,000 square feet of commercial space, what impact that would have on the community that would require special redress that the Board of Aldermen to do, i.e. expanding sewer, expanding fire department, expanding police department. Just so that there are some limits, that there is more review and more information gathered for us by having a general community impact statement that would address traffic and other things that the board would determine would be useful. At such a point where we wouldn't have questions on a large development like this before us today, we would have more, the planning process would be required to develop a community impact statement on those specific things, which would be probably described in the land use ordinance what we want to have done.
Okay.
Certainly, we haven't seen that much in traffic impact on something like this on Glenburn Road or whatnot, whatever this is going on. And I think it'd be helpful for the Board of Aldermen as well as ourselves to review such things.
And so I think our last discussion on this is, were you going to identify some volunteers from our board?
Yes, I think, what is it, 3 volunteers we need?
I think that's the most we can have, is that correct? No more than 4. Okay, so, you want to solicit those via email? And,
I can do that.
yeah, if you want to do that, then what we can do is, I'm happy to volunteer.
Thank you.
Be pleased to serve on our ad hoc committee so that we can,
We can do it right now. I mean, if both Heron and you and myself want to do it, that's
Okay.
fine. If we have a 4th member, if they want to join, that's fine too.
okay, and we can always add that member at a later date if necessary. But yes, I'm happy to have those, to sit in on those meetings and participate. And,
Well, I think you would be a wonderful contributor.
and then that way, you know, what I'd also like to do is, as we make recommendations and work with staff, to make those recommendations on what we'd like to add and or change in the land use ordinance, we can then give our board updates periodically on what we're thinking.
And of course, the Board of Aldermen would have to.
Certainly, yeah, they approve all ordinance revisions, edits, changes. Okay? Thank you, Don.
Okay.
All right, and yeah, if you'll just coordinate, I'd recommend we meet at Development Services.
I agree.
And if you'll coordinate with them and let myself and Heron know when we're gonna meet.
If
And
you need a 4th, I will be.
okay,
Sonny, if you want, that'd be it. I'll be sending all of you emails, and then we'll be working with, I guess, Morgan, you're gonna be helping us with this?
okay, sounds like a plan. Thank you, Don.
Thank you.
Okay, I think that gets us to the end of our new business, unless someone has something else that I'm not aware of that's not on our agenda. And so at this time, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
At this point, I'd like to introduce a motion to adjourn.
Okay, We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? We are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Done.